Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this is a big one. Did aliens invade a mall in Miami? We have an eyewitness who claims he saw aliens in a mall in Miami, but is he telling the truth? Or is he making it up? We'll find out as we analyse his words. If you're not familiar with the story, New Year's Day 2024, there was a huge fight at some place called the Bayside Marketplace, which is a mall in Miami. About 50 teenagers rioted there, but there was some strange video that came out of it. All sorts of rumours went around that this was not a riot by 50 teenagers. The police were actually there because the aliens had invaded the mall. This went viral, and we have an eyewitness who claims he was there, and we're going to analyse his words to see if he is telling the truth or making it up. What to watch for in this one? Well, the place where our memories exist is an entirely different place from where we would make up stories if we're telling them. So remembered events sit in one part of our brain, and we have experienced these events. We have one version of these events in our head, whereas imagined events, we're making them up in real time in our head. So they're coming from different places, and we'll use different language, different words as we describe them. The best thing I can tell you is watch out for this and ask, were they a participant? Did this happen to them? Or is it more like they're describing watching a movie or something they've been told about? If the like button is available to you, then if you press that, it will enable the whole world to find out if aliens invaded this mall in Miami. The like button spreads this like nothing else. It takes lots of hours to put a video like this together. So if you do press that like button, that would be amazing and really helpful. The subscribe or follow button is also really useful. It means you won't miss this. And always interested in your comments, observations, opinions, questions as well. You can do that on social media, or you can do that on this platform here if you can. And it means that if we get enough, we may do a follow-up video here. So are you ready for the words of a guy called Mo? Here's the story Mo tells. I was at the Miami Mall yesterday, and the government is lying. There were no kids fighting. Everyone started panicking because these grey creatures were walking around. They didn't make any noises or sounds, but stared and watched you move. I tried to take a video, but every time I would try to, it would just bug out. They set a perimeter and wouldn't let anybody out or in unless they went through their phones. We were visited by aliens, and the government is covering it up. They were about 6 to 7 feet tall and walked very slowly. They could turn their head around completely, and it seemed like they could change forms. But they didn't have any bones and could bend their body in whatever way. No fingers or feet, just arms and legs. They could also seemingly teleport. They weren't walking around normally, but instead disappearing and then quickly reappearing somewhere else. This allowed them to walk through some of the glass displays in the mall and through walls. You couldn't escape if they wanted to kill. But they didn't seem aggressive, nor did they seem like they wanted to kill anybody. It almost seemed like they were lost. But they also weren't scared of the army of police that was all around. They must have felt like they were far superior. They grounded all flights for a period yesterday. They shut down police scanners in Miami area for hours. It wasn't intentional. They had no choice. Whatever these creatures are interfered with electronics, which is why is there no video of this fight they're talking about? And then he shares a picture. This was posted earlier, and I cannot verify its authenticity. All I can say is that this looks very similar to what I and others reportedly saw. No fingers or legs, anatomically consistent with a being that glides as opposed to steps. That's Mo's story. Let's break it down. The first part of it. I was at the Miami Mall yesterday, and the government is lying. There were no kids fighting. Everyone started panicking because these grey creatures were walking around. They didn't make any noises or sounds, but stared and watched you move. How we start something when we say it is really important. It tends to reveal our priority and our reason for the communication. The best example I can think of this is if you send an email to complain about a product or a service you received, you tend to start it with something like, Dear Sir or Madam, I am writing to complain about the product that I bought from you on the 1st of January. You set out straight away why you are communicating. If you apply for a job that you've seen advertised, I am writing to apply for the job of accounts assistant as advertised. We set out the reason at the very beginning of our communication. And if that's what he's doing here, then what is he saying? What is the reason for him communicating? It's to tell us that the government is lying. Now, in his words, he's come face to face with creatures from another world that are like nothing we have experienced on this earth before. But the most important thing for him to say, that what I think is his reason for writing this, is to say the government is lying. None of that fantastical stuff comes in at the beginning. It's the fact the government is lying. I think that's what's most important to this person. He starts off by referring to it as the Miami Mall. I was at the Miami Mall yesterday, is what he says. When did you last go to a mall? How would you describe it? Would you call it the Chicago Mall, the Houston Mall, the Boston Mall? Or would you call it by the name? It was the Bayside Marketplace. Round about here, I'd say I went to the Trafford Centre or I went to Meadowhall. The Miami Mall is what an observer would call it. If you read that story in the papers, you may say to someone, hey, did you see what happened at the Miami Mall yesterday? Because you're not local enough to call it the Bayside Marketplace. So yeah, this already feels like the words of an observer, someone who wasn't there, because in his head, this is the mall in Miami, not the Bayside Marketplace that he was at. So already picking up words of an observer. By the way, everything I highlight, on their own, they might be all right. You know, we're not all consistent in the way that we tell stories. If someone tells you past events, it won't be perfect. There may be misspeaks, or there may be things that are a bit odd. But the more and more and more of them we see in a story, the more likely it is to be deceptive. A section here. Everyone started panicking because these grey creatures were walking around. Now, you'll notice he's not in this story at all. Again, I get this feeling of observer. Everyone started panicking. He doesn't include himself there, does he? It's not like I started panicking or we all started panicking. It's everyone started panicking. And what's the reason they were panicking? Because these grey creatures were walking around. Not because they appeared, but because they were walking around. You know, just put yourself in that situation. If these creatures that he's described appear, you're going to panic, yeah? Everyone's going to panic. But he says they didn't panic because they were there. They panicked because they were walking around. Not realistic. Two sections here. There were no kids fighting, he says, and they didn't make any noises or sounds. Now, look at some of the stuff he is going to talk about. The teleporting, the fact they glide, the fact they can go through walls, the fact they don't have any limb or they don't have any feet and hands. All those sort of amazing things happen. But he starts off by telling us what didn't happen. There were no kids fighting, and these creatures didn't make any noises or sounds. That's strange. That's odd. Everyone started panicking. Also, they stared and watched you move. Not him, just you. They stared and watched you move. Again, this feels to me like the words of someone outside imagining what's happening. His next section, I tried to take a video, but every time I would try to, it would just bug out. They set a perimeter and wouldn't let anybody out or in unless they went through their photos. We were visited by aliens and the government is covering it up. He says he tried to take a video, but every time I would try to. There's a distance here in the language. Much closer would be every time I tried, it would bug out. But instead it's every time I would try to. Just a distance in the language there that suggests this is not authentic, describing something that actually happened. This is not remembered events. This is him constructing what happened. So he's using language that is more distant than he would use if he experienced it. He says they wouldn't let anybody out or in. By the way, he talks about they a lot, and it's not clear sometimes when he says they, if he means the aliens or he means authorities. I'll come to that later, but I'm presuming here this is they meaning authorities, but it doesn't really matter at this point, but it will matter later. They wouldn't let anybody out or in unless they went through their photos. Now, I get that if there was something happening, number one, they would let people out, but maybe, yes, they would want to check through their photos. But number one, if there's an alien invasion happening in the mall, they just wouldn't let anyone in at all. They wouldn't check through their photos first. So again, it feels like it's inauthentic. You'll notice still, he's not saying this happened to him. They wouldn't let anybody out or in unless they went through their photos. They wouldn't let us out unless they went through our photos. Again, he's using really distant language and he's not saying this happened to him. The government is covering this up, by the way. You can see that there. Once again, the government is lying. The government is covering this up. I think that is his priority here, is he believes that government is covering a whole lot of things up, including alien invasions. Interesting here, they wouldn't let anybody out. That's kind of the end of the story, isn't it? You know, like, so if someone is telling us events that happened, they normally start at the beginning and go sequentially through the things that happened until they get to the end. He's just started this story. This is his second tweet on it, and already he's talking about getting out. So he's already at the end. And then he goes on to say more. Another tell that this is constructed. He's not going through things that happened that he has realistically experienced in a sequential order. Mo goes on to describe the aliens. They were around about 6 to 7 feet tall and walked very slowly. They could turn their head around completely, and it seemed like they could change forms, like they didn't have any bones and could bend their body in whatever way. No fingers or feet, just arms and legs. A very vague description about how tall they are. They were about 6 to 7 feet tall. There's 2 degrees of vagueness in there. Maybe about 6 feet tall, about 7 feet tall, or maybe he could say 6 to 7 feet tall. All of those would be kind of suitably vague. You know, we don't actually carry measuring sticks with us to measure aliens when we come up against them. But about 6 to 7 feet tall, really just a little bit too vague for me. Once again, did he experience this, or is he observing? Look, they could turn their head around completely. They could change forms and could bend their body. He doesn't say they did. He doesn't say he saw that. He doesn't say he experienced that. He doesn't say this happened in front of his eyes. He's just saying what they could do. He knows their capabilities. How does he know their capabilities? Maybe he's invented them in his head about all these things these people could do. So they could turn their head, not they turned their heads around completely. They could change forms, not they changed forms. And they could bend their body, not they bent their body in whatever way. They could also seemingly teleport. They weren't walking around normally, but instead disappearing and then quickly reappearing somewhere else. This allowed them to walk through some of the glass displays in the mall and through walls. You couldn't escape if they wanted to kill. They could, again, they could also seemingly teleport. And you've got the word seemingly there as well. And this is, again, seemingly, not they could teleport or they teleported. They could also seemingly teleport. Mo says here, they weren't walking around normally. Oh, really? Because previously you've said the creatures were walking around. And you said that they walked very slowly, but now you're saying they weren't walking around normally. They were doing this disappearing and quickly reappearing things. Inconsistency there. Again, making up stories is really, really hard. Keeping them, even something as short as this, keeping it consistent is very, very hard. Also, he talks about them teleporting, but then says this allowed them to walk through some of the glass displays, not teleport through some of the glass displays. And he also says that they could walk through walls. How does he know? Because if they teleported through a wall, you would not be able to see they're on the other side because it is a wall. Mo says, but they didn't seem aggressive, nor did they seem like they wanted to kill anybody. It almost seemed like they were lost. But they also weren't scared of the army of police that was all around. They must have felt like they were far superior. So again, we've got this distance thing here where it doesn't seem aggressive and it didn't seem like they wanted to kill. Not they weren't aggressive towards us and they didn't want to kill anybody or kill me. And also the order here, just wrong, right? Because if they weren't aggressive, then they didn't want to kill anybody. So you don't need to say they didn't want to kill anybody. You just need to say they weren't aggressive. And then we'll know they didn't want to kill anybody. If it was the other way around, that would be fine. They didn't want to kill anybody. They weren't even aggressive. But no, he puts it round this unbelievable way. They didn't seem aggressive and it didn't seem like they wanted to kill anybody. Once again, he's guessing stuff that almost seemed like they were lost. Now, almost seemed, just think about exactly what almost seemed means it wasn't the case. Yeah, it just seemed, kind of seemed, almost seemed, but almost is not full. Yeah, so he's kind of guessing what was going on there. But look how solid he is. In the next part, they weren't scared of the army of police. So he is sensing something at one point, but now he's very certain that they weren't scared. And, you know, unless you were communicating them. They're aliens from another world. They might not even know they're the police. Mo. Anyway. And then again, it's just looking at guessing the feeling. They must have felt like they were far superior. So again, there's no consistency here. Sometimes he's saying, this is kind of air they gave off. Then he's saying, I know this for certain. And then he's saying, this must have been the case. So Mo, again, not very consistent. I'm interested in that fact that he calls it the army of police. And then he thinks that the aliens were far superior. I think that he has a distrust or a dislike of authority. Hence, the government is lying. The government is covering things up. And then we have the army of police, which sounds like quite an aggressive term to describe a lot of police guys. And also that the aliens were better than them. They were far superior. So I think that is the reason why he's telling this story, is a distrust of authority. He might actually believe there were aliens there that day and it's been covered up, but he didn't experience it. Mo continues, they grounded all flights for a period yesterday. They shut down police scanners in the Miami area for hours. It wasn't intentional. They had no choice. Whatever these creatures are, interfered with electronics. Why is there no video of this fight they're talking about? Now, this is that use of they. And I believe he means the authorities here. So the authorities grounded all flights. They shut down police scanners. They had no choice. But because he's using they, which is a distant pronoun, it's far removed. I think, again, he's looking down or setting himself apart from authority again here. So they grounded all flights. They shut down police scanners. They had no choice. I hope you had a hard time understanding what he meant there, because it's not entirely clear who they are. It's not entirely, is they the authorities, the police, or is it the aliens? Why quite were these things shut down? Who shut these things down? Was it the aliens that grounded all the flights? Was it because of the aliens the flights were grounded? Basically, we'll have a hard time understanding this because he doesn't have the authentic language. He's making it up. He doesn't have the authentic language to convey a really simple, crisp, clear picture in my mind or in your mind as to what happened. And, that's why you get mumbo jumbo, like whatever these creatures are interfered with electronics. But again, no insight, no experience to say why this happened. If he was in a mall and we have these creatures interfering with electronics, did he experience any of this? Were they making automatic doors work amazingly, lights go on and off or anything like that? He doesn't have any authentic experience to call on, which is why this is real mumbo jumbo. Mo asks, why is there no video of this fight they're talking about? Well, Mo, if having video is what we need to prove what someone's talking about, where's yours? Finally, from Mo, this was posted earlier, and I cannot verify its authenticity, and it's a picture of supposedly an alien at the mall. All I can say is that this looks very similar to what I and others reportedly saw. No fingers or legs, anatomically consistent with a being that glides as opposed to steps. We have from Mo here saying, I cannot verify its authenticity. Earlier he said the government is lying. Earlier he said the government is covering it up. And he said there were no kids fighting. Mo has a real focus on deception and lying. Why is that? Potentially that is projection going on there. More from Mo. He said that this picture that he's posted looks very similar to what I reportedly saw. Oh, wait a minute, Mo. You saw it. You didn't reportedly see it, but now all of a sudden you are distancing yourself from it and saying it's what you reportedly saw. I mean, now I just really don't believe you. You might think I'm being unfair there because he says others in there. So if you looked at that, it's very similar to what others reportedly saw. Well, Mo's told us that many people were freaking out because these grey creatures were walking around the mall. He's told us there was an army of police that he saw that the aliens were not scared of. So this is not reportedly saw. You would not use reportedly saw to describe what others saw there if you were actually there at the time. What else does he say? Well, he says this picture here, it looks very similar to what I saw. No fingers or legs. Actually, Mo, that's not what you said you saw earlier. You said they had no fingers or feet, not no fingers and legs. You also said they had just arms and legs, so you've contradicted yourself there, Mo. and you say it's consistent with a being that glides as opposed to steps. So these beings, in Mo's words now, glided as opposed to stepping. And yet you told us they were walking around. Didn't make any noises, just walking around. They walked very slowly. They weren't walking normally, but they disappear and appear somewhere else, allowing them to walk through glass. And that's the analysis of Mo's alien at the mall story done. Have you got a conclusion? Because I have. I've got a really, really simple conclusion on Mo. He's lying. He's making the whole thing up. Why? I don't know. But if I had to guess, he thinks the government lies to us about many things. He has a distrust and a dislike of authority, including the police, including the government. And maybe even in Mo's head, he thinks this did happen. And he sees no harm whatsoever in telling a complete lie about what happened, because he believes it did happen. And if it did happen, then what's the harm in me saying that it did happen and telling this story? But Mo, your storytelling is absolutely rubbish. And if you want any more facts around why Mo is lying, if you're still sitting, listening to this, watching this and going, do you know what? He might be telling the truth. I do believe there was aliens at the mall. Mo said that this happened to him yesterday. The alien sighting that was actually the riot at the mall happened 3 days before Mo said that it happened. So Mo is a liar. But this is not just about dunking on Mo. I'd like you to go away from this with some skills so that when someone is telling you a story, you can have a look at that story and see whether you think it is truthful or not. So imagined events, things that we remembered events, so things we experienced, they're coming from the remembrance part of our brain, where our memories are stored. Imagined events are coming from a different part in our brain, so we talk about them very, very differently. You can have a look at what people are saying. Were they there? Are they using words that say they experienced this? Or is it more like they were a spectator watching it on a television screen or reading a book about them? And remember as well, Mo was very bad at this. Are they talking about what happened, what actually happened, events that happened, or are they talking in more vague terms about what could happen? Watch out for them when someone's telling you a story, and you will be much more likely to know if you're hearing the truth or if you're hearing deception. What do you think? You can get in touch on social media, or you can leave a comment here if you like. I'd love to know what you think about Mo's story about seeing the aliens. Share this with anyone that believes in aliens, doesn't believe in aliens. I'm sure they would love to get part of this. And the like button, thank you very much if you press that. It really does help this get to more people. And you can subscribe or you can follow this channel to get more content as and when it happens. If you want even more, neveratruerword.com is the place to go to. Lots of podcasts. Get in touch on social media. Sign up for the newsletter. There's more videos that you can watch, and you can buy a couple of books as well that will help you understand more about the world around you through analysing what has been said. And we'll see you very soon for some more from Never a Truer Word.